I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. We've all heard this trope or seen it on a bumper sticker. I want to explore it a little bit because I'm not a legal expert. I do not have a legal background. My lane in this is as it plays to social considerations. So I am a graduate of the Mag 40 program. I have had some fairly extensive conversations with the combative lawyer, Chet Palumbo, and we actually sat down and did a live stream for my Patreon. I'll link to that down below if you want to join so you can see that. But I think it's relevant to talk about because there's a couple of different reasons. Number one, obviously, many people who believe in firearms ownership and concealed carry and having personal involvement in your own self-preservation tend to be very principled individuals. The sticking point is that sometimes they will get hung up on general principle to the complete sort of ignoring the realities of public perception and thinking simply that they are able to cloak themselves in this mantle of righteousness and that everybody is going to see things exactly the way they do. Well, unfortunately, that's not exactly the case. And there's a couple different elements of this that I think are worth talking about. The first simply being that from the available information, it suggests that the jury is not going to be a jury of your peers. Anybody who is a gun owner, an avid trainer, or frankly, even really sympathetic to the idea of using violence in defense of self or others is very likely going to be eliminated during jury selection. What they're looking for are people that are as ignorant as possible on the subject. Ideally, they're looking for people that have no strong opinions one way or the other. So that's a huge factor. We can stamp our feet and talk about how much, that may or may not be bogus, but that's the reality of it. The other part is the demographic. It's setting aside the knowledge base or lack thereof. From all accounts, the people that you are going to have to convince that your actions were reasonable are generally going to be retired grade school teachers. These are the kinds of folks that spent a good chunk of their professional career teaching kids to solve problems with their words, not their hands. So, again, it goes back to that. They're not necessarily immediately on board with the idea of righteous use of force. And, kind of the hack that I've heard is, would you be able to explain this to your grandmother in a way that they would say that they would have made the same decision? And I think that that's particularly relevant, because at the end of the day, that's the standard to which we are going to be held as civilian defenders, is reasonableness. And yes, part of that is knowing what we knew at the time, and that opens the door to educate the jury on some of the finer points of defense craft, provided that you've got the budget for expert witnesses or at least a lawyer that has the appropriate chops to, walk you down that path in the event that you have to serve as your own subject matter expert. But here's the other part. How many people have you heard speak with just a very high level of contempt of juries? Again, the trope is typically it's 12 people that were too stupid to get out of jury duty. Those are the 12 people that hold your entire future in their hands. So, are you really going to be that snide and dismissive, or is it worth spending a little time and kind of understanding what their collective thought process is so that you possess the capacity to speak to someone that doesn't share your experience and make your perspective a compelling one. This is another reason why the verbal agility piece, I think, is so critical. It's not just in the moment with managing unknown contacts. And this is another reason why I view myself as so fortunate, because I've been just socially in positions where I've talked to people who are philosophically on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from me, whether it be, politically or just their general social attitudes towards violence at large. And not necessarily saying that I have persuaded everybody, or even that I've made them dramatically shift their own thinking. But on more than a few occasions, I've been able to take someone who started out thinking, well, there's really no justifiable reason for a reasonable citizen to ever have to shoot another, to at least show them the complexity and the nuance to where it's like, that's something I hadn't considered. And I think that's really a critical piece because, like I said, a lot of folks really seem inclined to dig their heels in on general principle and fixate on, well, the way things should be, as opposed to the reality in front of them. And it's critical to be able to deal with what is immediately in front of you, because good, bad, or indifferent, whether you like it or not, that's the problem you got to solve. And so that's why I harp on the verbal skills and the social skills and the idea of fostering, not quite as homogenous a social circle, because there's benefit to being able to sit with people and objectively just share different ideas and concepts. And, it's almost like sparring, essentially, because it hones the skill, it shows where the weak points in your game are, and it also shows what elements can be successful. I had mentioned this on, I think it was Lee Weems's podcast, especially with the very small crop of students that I've had, which are none of whom, and granted, it was only about a dozen people total, so this is not a large sample size, but none of them are really anybody that you would look at and consider part of gun culture. When I am explaining to them that concealed carry is simply an extension of boundary enforcement and bodily autonomy, I'm able to use principles that they already understand and hold dear and show them the relevance to this thing that they're less familiar with. And that's what you're going to have to do, or your lawyer, or your subject matter expert, if you can afford one, is going to have to do to the jury. So, the whole self-defense is a human right and shall not be infringed, or even just the black letter law, ain't necessarily enough to protect you. Now, yes, again, by all accounts, a fairly small percentage of criminal charges filed actually go to a jury trial. There are states where a claim of self-defense is required to go to a grand jury. And so, again, you're not necessarily going to be in a circumstance there where you're going to be testifying. My understanding of the grand jury process is it's basically the prosecution simply trying to show that there is enough merit there for it to go to a jury trial. But here's the thing. There's nothing to say that your social media activity up to that point isn't going to be submitted as evidence. And if you listen to like the CCW Safe podcasts, they've got a few examples of where, posturing or blustery, posts, or talking about the way things should be, or, what somebody thinks they would do, have jammed people up when they find themselves in a defensive situation. So again, it's where this whole social fluency thing is a much larger piece of the equation than I think some people give it credit for, because whether it's in person or digitally, we spend a good chunk of our lives interacting and interfacing with other people. And so, are you able to effectively convey your point to someone who doesn't necessarily agree with it? And it's not just a matter, it's not this battle of attrition of, bludgeoning people with facts and whoever's loudest and has the biggest pile of data wins. There's a reason that verbal judo is a term. There is a certain amount of actually leveraging the other person's current thinking to assist in making your point. So I just want people to think about that, because again, it's critical that we try and maintain a well-rounded skill set. Shooting's fun if you're moderately good at it. Same thing with martial arts. I'm not going to go so far as to say weightlifting is fun. I still don't particularly enjoy it, but it's good for me, so I do it. But yeah, the training piece is fun. This isn't nearly as entertaining, but it can be. Again, if you have the right people in your sphere, you can treat it kind of like a sparring session. You just kind of go back and forth and almost make a game out of it. But I want to hear people's thoughts on this below. Have you had a particular success where you've made somebody's light bulb go off and go, "Huh, I didn't think about that"? Have you had just a dramatic win where you've brought somebody completely around to a way of thinking when they were initially completely opposed to it? I want to hear about that too. Are you having a struggle where you feel like your point is one that should be easily understood, but it's just not making headway? Put that down in the comments and maybe we can kind of help troubleshoot it. Let me know what you think. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic week. Stay dangerous. Stay sharp.